Before the debate even begins, it's important to understand the stakes. In Washington, government funding fights are rarely just about budgets. They're also about power, policy, and political messaging. In this moment on the Senate floor, lawmakers clash over the funding of the Department of Homeland Security and the consequences of a potential shutdown. The debate highlights two competing narratives: who is responsible and what solution should come first.
Pennsylvania, make a left on Constitution, and see the sunrise over the Capitol. I genuinely feel the weight of how important this office is. And I actually have incredible admiration, not for my forefathers came from South America, but for the forefathers of the people who built this country, to think of the wisdom of what our founders envisioned. Our founders created an institution that is genuinely, it gives me chills to think about the genius of what they did. They created a House of Representatives where every 2 years there's an election, there's a lot of friction that goes on, and a simple majority passes a bill. And yet they wanted the Senate to be more deliberative. They wanted to force us, Mr. President, and you personally know how hard it is. They wanted to force us to have strong conversations with the opposing party to get to a resolution. They really did. They didn't want it to just be simple majority rule. They wanted to make it really difficult. But what I've experienced over the last 14 months, I got to tell you, is decently disappointing. Because for me, what I think should unite us is what do the American people really want from us? What is it that they want their leaders to do? We've now seen it 3 times in a row this year, where my Democrat colleagues have shut the government down. Now, what does that mean? You hear a lot of speeches. What it means is that if you're a government employee, tomorrow's Friday and it's payday, you're not getting a check. Imagine what that feels like. You're a dad. Imagine what that feels like to have to explain to your kids why you went to work. You did your job. You didn't do anything wrong. And you don't have the money that you need to pay your basic bills. And yet us here in the United States Senate, our paychecks are uninterrupted. We get paid to do our job a lot more, magnitude more money than average Americans make. We'll leave here today and travel to far-off places. And yet we'll walk by TSA agents that aren't getting paid. We expect Border Patrol to do their job. We expect Customs to do their job. We expect FEMA to do their job. I have a big Coast Guard presence in Ohio. We need them to do their job, and yet none of them are getting paid. They did nothing wrong. There wasn't a single employee of the Department of Homeland Security who is affected by this that they personally are the reason this department is funded.
What you're hearing here is a classic framing battle in American politics. One side emphasizes the immediate human impact of a government shutdown, workers missing paychecks, and agencies operating under strain. At the same time, the broader issue is legislative responsibility. Who should compromise first, and what conditions should come with funding? Shutdowns historically occur when Congress fails to pass appropriations or temporary funding measures before deadlines. But beyond procedure, these moments often become powerful political messaging opportunities. So the key question becomes, is this primarily a policy dispute or a public narrative battle over accountability?
So I truly, from the bottom of my heart, ask my Democrat colleagues, with all absolutely desire to get a result, is let's spend 2 weeks. And we can start today, by the way. There's no reason for us to go home. I'm willing to start today, like we start right now. And we sit down together. We look at the appropriations bill for the entire Department of Homeland Security, and in good faith, not with political theater, not to score political points, not to be cool on social media, but actually sit in a room and say, let's get this entire department funded. Let's not leave here today and walk by a TSA agent knowing that we are the reason they're not getting paid. That's unacceptable. Let's sit down together over 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. We can do that for 14 days. I'm willing to stay in Washington, D.C. for 14 days and hash out an agreement. We can do it. That's what our voters want. That's why they elected us. They don't want us to be shirts and skins on everything. So, Mr. President, I ask make a very simple motion. I think most Americans would appreciate. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to immediate consideration of calendar number 156, H.R. 4553. I further ask that the substitute amendment number 4353 be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended to be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. What that means is that we can fund the employees of the Department of Homeland Security now while we spend 2 weeks working together to get a resolution.
Is there an objection to the motion?
Mr. President,
Senator from Nevada is recognized.
I object. We've had more than 2 weeks. I'm sorry.
Question's heard.
Do I need to say something different?
Yep, nope, I understand. Look, I understand the political pressures. I really do. We'll see that sometimes appealing to a certain voter bloc is maybe what makes us popular. But I want to read you a quote from the Democrat whip, Deputy Democrat whip, a senior appropriator, by the way, who said, "We are very serene with what's going on." We're very serene with what's going on. You're serene that tonight, a dad, a mom is going to come home and say, "Can't do that. Can't pay for your dance recital. Can't pay for your spring break ticket because just didn't get a paycheck." I want you to explain to a 12-year-old child why you're not getting paid. They're going to talk about Senate procedure. They're going to talk about the appropriations process. Look, this is just another effort to distract us from what's going on here. So again, I just urge my Democrat colleague to consider, as you think about your own state. Now, by the way, I genuinely believe you deeply care about your state. I hear you talk about it, and it's absolutely sincere. You deeply care about your state. Think about those Border Patrol agents that are welcoming visitors from all over the world to Las Vegas. Think about those ICE agents that are arresting criminal aliens, like the one that was just recently arrested. That was a pretty bad guy. Imagine those TSA agents, the Coast Guard, FEMA, cybersecurity. You have a lot of those resources in your state. Can I please ask you for some level of humanity to get this done? Reconsider your objection, and let's fund the Department of Homeland Security TSA agents for 2 weeks. Please, I ask you to do that. I yield the floor.
Moments like this illustrate how deeply divided funding debates in Washington can become. Each side frames the situation differently, one emphasizing the urgency of restoring pay for federal workers and funding the entire department, the other arguing that reforms and accountability measures should accompany that funding. In reality, these disputes reflect larger questions about immigration enforcement, federal authority, and legislative compromise. But now we want to hear from you. Do you think Congress should prioritize immediate funding during shutdown threats, or should policy reforms come first? Share your perspective in the comments below, and if you value balanced, fact-based breakdowns of major political moments like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the stories shaping government and public policy.